Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. As the school year begins, more layoffs have been announced at post-secondary schools. We'll check in with our reporter at Vancouver Community College for the latest. And do you really know what your children are seeing online? How do you keep them safe from questionable content? We'll have a social media expert here to answer your questions. And a big announcement in one of the province's biggest cities, Councillor Linda Annis will join us to talk about what the future holds for her and the city of Surrey. And I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott today. And of course, this is BC Today. Thank you so much for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. How do you handle what content your kids are exposed to online? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call us at 1-800-825-5950 or hit pound 690. You can also email us bctoday@cbc.ca. It is back to school, but for many colleges and universities in the Lower Mainland, the new semester is off to a rocky start. Faculty associations at Vancouver Community College and Langara College say more of their members have received layoff notices just as students return to class. It's the latest sign of a growing crisis in BC's post-secondary system. And for more, we're joined now by CBC reporter Johna Baylon. She joins us from VCC. Hi, Johna. Thanks so much for checking in with us today.
Yes, Amy. Hi.
So what can you tell us about these latest layoff notices?
Yes, Amy, as you said, not the best news to start off the new school year with. Over 30 faculty members at VCC have received notice that this will be their last semester. Now, those faculty members are coming from 6 different departments. We just learned from the VCC Faculty Association that those departments predominantly serve international students. And this is the 3rd round of cuts they've seen this year. They were told to expect a 4th round next year. Now, VCC is not alone. As you mentioned, there are other universities and post-secondary schools seeing this. KPU has said it's removed 25 vacant positions. They expect to remove 45 more by March next year. And Langara College has also said they've removed 69 positions.
Now, why is it that so many post-secondary schools are just struggling right now?
Yes, so what a lot of the schools have said is that it's due to the cuts in international student visas being given out. Last year, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada has said that they are reducing their intake of foreign students, and that includes students in the graduate and doctoral levels as well. Earlier today, we also spoke to Frank Costco with the VCC's Faculty Association. Here's what he had to say.
I feel Canada and BC's approach to post-secondary is immature and embarrassing. I mean, imagine, for 20 years we've relied on foreign families to fund our post-secondary system. And some colleges have built up huge surpluses, and the government loves that, and built buildings with that money.
Yes, Amy, so just a bit more on that. Earlier this year, KPU has said that they're projecting revenue from international tuition and fees to go down by $49 million in the 2026 fiscal year. A researcher at UBC has also said that more and more universities are relying on international tuition as funding from the province declines. Amy?
And I think the question a lot of people have is what impact might this have on students? Will these cuts, say, impact their ability to complete their courses or graduate?
So VCC, the Faculty Associations, has said that it will definitely impact all students, not just international students, but domestic students as well. With fewer instructors, fewer staff, there'll be less programming, fewer course offerings. And we also spoke to Pauline Greaves with Langara College Faculty Association. Here is how she would describe it.
It makes it really difficult for our students, domestic students, who are the ones that the college is structured to provide programs to get the credentials that they need. We are a university transfer institution, and so it would make it incredibly difficult for students to actually come to Langara if they can't get the courses to transfer to UBC or SFU.
Now, Amy, of course, in addition to students, the college, the Faculty Association with VCC has said it will also impact staff for sure, many of who've spent years investing in the college, in their students, and in the community as well.
Yeah, of course. And is there any sign that the province is stepping in?
So what we've heard from BC's Ministry of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills is that they're monitoring the situation. They have said that they are working with the institutions, with the schools, on managing costs and and increasing revenues, although they did not specify how specifically. Amy?
Johna, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been there for much of the morning, and we'll continue to check in with you.
Thanks, Amy.
That is the CBC's reporter, Johna Baylon, and she joined us from BCC. It is 12:11, and this is BC Today. Yesterday, we asked you about public transit in your community and whether or not the services meet your needs. A number of you called in and told us about overcrowding, bus frequencies, and what investments you thought are needed. And this week, TransLink just expanded services in 53 routes of Metro Vancouver as part of its 2025 investment plan. TransLink CEO Kevin Quinn was on the early edition this morning and told Stephen Quinn about the Transportation Authority's priorities.
Meeting the needs of the region today that we know are so important, and that folks are encountering with overcrowded buses, the need to move around this region more than ever before. And so we were able to fund with that investment plan a 5% bus service expansion. Now, 5%, that may not sound like a lot, but I got to tell you, this is our largest bus service expansion in nearly a decade. That, as you noted, will serve 53 routes. We'll be increasing service on 53 routes, which, to put in terms of people, serves about 100,000 people a day.
And you had a lot to say about public transit. Kathy wrote, as a retired person, I like to volunteer for festivals. I live in Surrey and recently volunteered for Fort Langley Jazz Festival. A 2-hour bus trip one way really takes the joy out of it for me. Was the same for Vancouver Folk Fest and Burnaby Blues Fest. Very, very disappointing. And Christina says, public transit is not meeting my needs for a variety of reasons. The most important one is unreliability. It was ironic that this morning, while your colleagues from Early Edition were praising the service extensions, I got 3 notifications from TransLink about SkyTrain suspension and buses. This is the time when universities try out the service, and if TransLink can't get it right, they will lose customers for the school year. All right. Time to admit it. If you're a parent or a guardian, you may or may not battle that temptation to just grab your child's phone and look through their internet history. And that content can be a minefield. There's social media bullying to pornography and toxic podcasts. But on the positive side, there's also fun dance trends or lifestyle tips, or maybe even they're part of an online fan community. So we're asking you, what online content is your child consuming? How do you navigate the somewhat endless stream of online content with your child? And how do you navigate what your child posts online? Call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or you can call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And unfortunately, we do not have a TikTok live today, but we hope to have it back up and running soon. Now, for more on this topic, we have with us Jesse Miller. He is the founder of Mediated Reality, an education company focused on media education and media literacy. Thank you so much for joining us, Jesse.
Thank you for having me, as always.
So this topic is one that a parent can find themselves thinking about for days and falling into endless rabbit holes of what ifs. Can you give us a sense of just that range of things a child or a teen can be seeing when, say, they're scrolling through like TikTok or even Instagram?
Well, they can land on your program on a TikTok live. The reality of it is that it does come down to the child and their ability to get online. We see parents who obviously advocate their guidance and overseeing of their kids' use of the internet when it comes to personal mobile technology. We also see the parents who only allow big screens in open spaces when it comes to static home technology. The reality of it is that kids will navigate in a variety of spaces, whether it be school, to and from school, the backseat of the car, or in the family home, a wide range of content, whether it be streaming a television show, a movie, whether it be consuming social media content that is generated by influencers or their friends, whether it be listening to a podcast, whether it be sports-based, politics. It doesn't really matter the content itself. It just comes down to the child and where their interests lie or what they stumble into.
Well, and that's the stumbling into, I think that it does raise alarms for a lot of parents. And I'm not trying to fearmonger here, but the internet can be, a sort of vast and dangerous space, especially for young people. What are some of the harms that people have to watch out for?
So we're at this interesting point here where we actually have a lot of parents who are raising kids where those parents themselves use the internet in the dial-up stage of debauchery, if we could put it that way, because they themselves got themselves into chat rooms, they were downloading pornography, they were stealing music, they were doing a lot of things online that really gave us the foundation of our primal concerns about safety. Now, the thing is, the majority of those individuals had positive experiences. Maybe they tested some waters, but the reality of it is they have a good experience to kind of give to their children about that content that they themselves consumed, and they recognize that their children live in a boundaryless society where the borders of parents shutting down the phone, taking away the dial-up, are out of our societal control. So within that, we think about the kids, the families, educators themselves. I mean, now we have a huge amount of educators coming into the field who grew up with social media. So they're not bringing an archaic viewpoint of what is good and bad versus the internet. They themselves have shared experience. So in the approach of what is bad, we have to really kind of talk about what we think is a collective problem for our kids accessing, and whether that be pornography, which is obviously a leading concern, whether it be them generating the pornography themselves in the sense of self-made content and what the risk factors are there. At the same time, when it comes to consumption, we have a huge amount of conflicting data, not data, but viewpoints about how much is too much. And then we have books. And the big thing about books is that that's an easy grab. And it's like, oh, here's what's wrong with society. We saw The Anxious Generation become a top seller over the past 2 years. And that book itself is rooted in very poor data collection. So we have to take a local approach as opposed to a worldwide approach to how kids are using the internet in British Columbia communities.
Oh, and that's a very good way of putting it. Even though, they have access to so much all around the world, we need to really bring it down to what their local influences are and what they will be impacted for. I do want to bring in a caller that we've had from Haley in Kelowna. Hi, Haley. Thanks for joining BC today.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I sure can. And what are your thoughts about online content for kids?
Well, I find it all quite overwhelming. I am a mother to 3. My eldest is 13, but I'm also a psychotherapist. So the approach I've taken is to kind of duck in right at the source. I understand kids need to be in touch with their friends, in touch with me. And so what I've opted to do is my daughter, who's 13, has an Apple Watch.
Okay.
And I think that the watch format is a really great tool for parents to have that would help them be in contact with their kid, but would also limit the kid from being able to, say, take pictures of herself and upload those, or to really take part in social media in a meaningful way. So I know most parents are pretty tired in the evening, and the thought of having to go through all of my children's data streams, that's just a bit much more that I think I can take on. So this way I don't feel I need to do that. Her watch is fully enabled with its own number, internet connection, but it's also connected to my phone. So I know kind of exactly what she is doing if I wanted to take a look.
And has there been any pushback from the kids, either, sort of initially, or as they've gotten a bit older and maybe want some more independence, they want you to be less involved with what they're looking at?
Not in that way. My daughter would like a phone, but she admits it's so that she could take photos.
Okay.
And that would be of her and her friends. And she also knows my job, so she's pretty understanding. I'm pretty relaxed in almost every other way. And so when I take a hard line on this one, she's been pretty good about it. We might reassess once she reaches 16, which I think is what most of the literature is saying now is is a reasonable age for children to be able to manage their social media presence. But certainly before that, it's just a hard no-go. And I did get her the watch fairly young, so she did feel special that way.
Right.
So I think I've struck a pretty decent balance where she can talk to her friends, she can look up things, but she can't take part in the more harmful kind of video accessing social media sites and those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. Haley, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And Jesse, is that an approach that maybe parents need to look at, sort of baby steps into the world of being online, where they can stay in touch with their friends? They're not removing that. They're just removing that temptation to post photos or dig into social media.
Yeah, some really good points from Haley, obviously from an academic and family-based approach. One of the things we have to keep in mind here is that we heard 3 kids. We focus on the elder of the children, and in the reality of it is that when we have that really rooted academic approach, we are going, okay, what are the balances we're looking for? Not every family in British Columbia has that privilege. So within that, we have to keep in mind that the majority of kids in BC who receive hand-me-down phones, or they receive devices for the purpose of keeping the kid entertained,
Right.
There isn't as much active parenting. And so when I heard Haley say, at the end of the night, we don't actually have this time, that's where actually more parents do need to take a step forward and approach media literacy. Watch shows together as a family, talk about the themes that your kids are seeing. Even if it's not necessarily a 30-minute consumption of a show, you're looking at the snippets and what the trending topics are within their multimedia consumption. And so if we approach it in the sense of each child, not all kids in the family home, recognize that there are tech limitations we can actually introduce, in the sense of the Apple Watch is a great tool to minimize some of those concerns, especially with photo sharing. But just keep in mind, we as parents, we've set this up as an expectation, because if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, no one was taking 24 photos
Right.
of them with a camera and then taking it to the drugstore to get developed. We are in a consumption-based society where the ease of use is primarily where our kids are. So in that idea of limiting photos because we're worried about the content, it's really good to actually introduce other tools that could allow your kids to take pictures but aren't connected to the internet.
Right.
So a old digital camera, something along those lines.
Well, and I've noticed that those are coming back a little bit in fashion, as kids want all things retro. And the sigh of relief that crossed my mind, even Polaroids, something like that can be sort of novel and a way for them to have that experience without that temptation necessarily of online. I want to bring in another call, this one from Jen in Prince George. Good afternoon, Jen.
Hi there. I mostly wanted to share some resources that have been super helpful for our family.
Okay.
So one is Powered Up. It's run by this amazing lady named Carrie from Nanaimo. And what I love about Carrie is she's so positive. So kids and teens are going to love learning from her. And she's also one of the only adults that I've come across who wants to talk about media literacy, who is going to dive in to pornography, which as a culture we have to get a hold on, because it's really unhealthy the way what's out there for access. And adults got to get real about it, and Carrie gets real about it, and I just love that. And she has lots of different programs in person in Nanaimo, which I don't live in Nanaimo, so I haven't attended, but I've done some of her online ones. The other one is the White Hatter. You can follow him online, and if your family's ever in a crisis, you can contact them. If your child is in a media crisis where they're being sextorted or anything like that. And what I love about him is he's more pro-tech than I am, so it's nice to have an expert who kind of pushes my boundaries a bit, who I read about and engage with his ideas. And the last recommendation I have is this book by Jillian Roberts, and she's a therapist and an academic from Victoria, and the book's called Kids, Sex, and Screens. And it's amazing because the main point in that book is you have to accept your kids for who they are. And we talk about, we want to teach kids how to make good choices and all that stuff, but if we don't accept our children for who they are unconditionally, we can't accept them. We can't expect them to make good choices, because they're going to go to the internet for that acceptance. Yeah. And I just wanted to share those things.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jen. And I just want to ask you, when you said he sort of pushes your boundaries of tech and he's a bit more pro-tech, in what ways do you mean?
Well, like, for example, he'll take the concept of AI, which I just think, like, honestly, I think AI is the end of a lot of positive things about our culture and our civilization, but he'll be more nuanced about it. And he'll be like, here's some aspects that might be helpful or might be healthy, and here's what you have to look out for. And I mean, that's really great to read, even though I'm not moving my own dial on that. It's just really nice to have somebody who is really nuanced about things and not just coming from a fear-mongering point of view,
Right.
which he could easily do because he helps people in the most worst situations online.
Right. And I really appreciate that, Jen. Thank you so much. And Jesse, that sort of brings up, it is good to, we do fall into this habit, I suppose, this sort of fear spiral when we're like, it's all terrible, it's all bad. But it is good to remember that technology is a part of our life. And then, learning how to use it in a beneficial way and teaching our children how to have balance and adapt and, use it wisely is also very important, instead of just saying, no, it's terrible, you can't have it.
Yeah, and great resources offered by the caller in the sense of Carrie Ishram and the Lauer family. Just as a couple notes, though, that if you as a family are focused on some concerns involving sextortion, you shouldn't be sending that to any charities or private businesses. Those should be going directly to the police or through the Erase program that the province of British Columbia offers, because one, you're maximizing reporting tools, but you're also using what the government has in place. And so in that, when we look at the overarching concerns that parents have, yes, being tech positive is very, very good in our schools. It's very good when teachers are leading with that. And the more that parents are having healthy conversations around the technology that we are all using every day, the more the kids are going to understand that there are not only experts in the field, but the thing is, the majority of adults really have no idea what they're doing on social media. And we can learn that from looking at any Facebook group based in British Columbia when it comes to community dialogue. The reality here is that there are so many individuals who are either rooted in one belief of how the internet has going to come into our everyday lives, or how children are using these tools. And again, each child is different. There are obviously trends themselves, but the trends themselves will change very quickly. We just have to look at the overarching behaviors.
Yeah, and it always is that big picture aspect that I think a lot of us are not so good at using. We tend to focus on one specific thing, one thing that scares us quite typically, and we don't take that measured approach. I would love more people to join our discussion, Jesse. They can call us, of course, at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And we do have our TikTok stream, our live, back up and running, so you can leave a comment for us there. We're talking about online safety and technology with Jesse Miller. He is the founder of Mediated Reality, and he is an education company that focuses on media education and media literacy. We are going to take a quick break for the news, Jesse, but we're going to rejoin you in just a few minutes to continue this. So get your calls in now. Please get your emails in to 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca or join our TikTok live at CBC British Columbia. It is 12:29, just coming up on the half-past mark of the hour, and it is time for the CBC News with Tarnjeet Parmar.
Good afternoon. An air quality warning is in place for Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley due to wildfire smoke. The Metro Vancouver Regional District issued the warning, which is expected to last for a few days or until there's a change in the weather. The hazy conditions are caused by fires burning east of Hope, near Whistler, in the Cariboo and in the U.S. People most at risk, such as seniors, pregnant women, and young children, are being told to limit time outdoors. Surrey City Councillor Linda Annis has announced her intentions to run for mayor in next year's civic election. Annis says her priorities will include bringing more jobs to the city, improving transit, and building more public playgrounds and pools. She also criticized current Mayor Brenda Locke's efforts in transitioning the Surrey Police Service from RCMP during her term. Annis was the only Surrey First Party candidate elected to council in 2018 and was re-elected in 2022. And members of the BC General Employees Union are once again walking picket lines in Victoria, Surrey and Prince George. It is the second day of job action. Union President Paul Finch has said there could be an escalation if government negotiators fail to return to the bargaining table with a better wage offer. The government has proposed a smaller increase as it struggles with a $10 billion deficit. Those are your news headlines. For more information, you can go to the website, cbc.ca/BC.
Thank you so much, Taranjeet. Nice to have you here in the afternoon. And we are continuing our discussion about online safety and the content that your kids are navigating through and how you help them navigate that. We're joined today by Jesse Miller of Mediated Reality, and it is an education company focused on media education and media literacy. Hi, Jesse. We do have another call that's come in, and this one is from Lee in Kelowna. Hi, Lee. Thanks for joining the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. What are your thoughts on today's topic?
I'm finding that there are many studies coming out about how online use from children and even adults are very addictive and can be very harmful mentally to children. And I'm wondering if there should be a distinction between children, of course, educating them with technology, but conflating it with actually being able to go on the internet. And using TikTok, for example, when you have scrolling features and whatnot. These are dopamine hits, from what I can tell, and this can be very harmful, very addictive to children. And to conflate technology with just online content, I feel there should be a distinction. I don't think that children should have any business being online in any kind of media until they're much older. And even adults these days are becoming addicted to these kinds of platforms.
Well, I appreciate that that comment, Lee. And Jesse, I do see you shaking your head perhaps in disagreement a little bit. So I'd like to give you a chance to rebut. I mean, she's talking about a dopamine hit and guilty of scrolling for that cute cat photo. But what are your thoughts about making that distinction and how kids are online?
So the hard part with the addiction statement is that we really have to quantify what addiction looks like. And so if anybody who's listening has had experience with somebody who really struggles with addictions in their lives, whether it be alcohol or narcotics, we recognize how destructive addictions can be in our family homes and our communities. And so we have to be careful how we throw that in with the idea of our kids are addicted. We have built a society around technology, using technology for the purpose of communication, convenience-based tools in the sense of going places and driving. But the reality of it is that this is our society. And so what we actively look for in the sense of removing ourselves from technology use is a self-control, a choice of when and how we use these tools. And you ask any child if they've seen their parents at practice or at the dinner table choosing to scroll through the device, it is about our justifications, not so much about our addictions, but justifications of time management. Oh, I was just checking an email. Oh, I got a text message. Oh, I want to see what somebody wrote on Facebook. And so within that data set, there is no collective data that shows that kids are collectively addicted to these tools that we introduce. But yes, these tech companies do introduce ways of keeping us subscribed, keeping us looking at the contents. And so, yes, you have to look at regulatories that minimize how much time we spend online. But the thing is, if we're using technology for purpose, I could use my computer, my screens for about 8 to 9 hours a day for the purpose of messaging, emails, work, something like this. But if our children are going to school using technology for the purpose of education, what does social media inclusion look like in that space? Can they use Instagram to further their learning? Can they use a tool like Zoom? And if we learned anything from the pandemic, it was that without these tools, we as a society actually would not have done very well. So when we consider, are our kids addicted or adults? Yes, media literacy is definitely needed when it comes to understanding the content on the internet and what we consume. But each individual has to look at their wherewithal and how much do they use as that dopamine hit, or how many times in a day do they just find the balance themselves, and do they find times to disconnect and say, here's where I have my own regulatories, and if there is a problem, how to balance that with those who support them in their lives.
Right. Okay. Across the Atlantic, the UK took they kind of took it to an extra step with the Online Safety Act, and it requires websites to ask UK users to verify their age for websites that contain pornography and other content deemed harmful to minors. What kind of age protections are there in Canada other than just clicking a box that says I'm over 18?
There's not a lot when it comes to the idea of verification. We can't really actually introduce a lot of age gating in these social media communities. And even then with the UK law, there is no legal consequence of using a VPN. You can bypass it in a heartbeat if you choose to. So within that, this idea of 18, let's just get away from age regulation for a second, because the age part for me is just an argument of, is somebody emotionally mature enough? And we know that the developing brain is not emotionally mature enough for most things until 25. So you had a second caller who highlighted, the scourge of pornography. Pornography that is ethical, it's created in a healthy way, that is marketed and designed for adults, can be something that our society relies on to basically explore something that's very normal. But when we have concerns about kids accessing it, there is still always going to be content online that kids can access. So you want that media literacy piece of what is appropriate based on age. And so the program that was introduced, yes, there are extremes in the sense of some content may be totally detrimental, but there is healthy, explicit content that people can access and have good conversations about, which families should be doing based on how we talk about the content our kids consume. So that can be introduced within school-based assemblies in the sense of sexual health education, and then media literacy can fit into that. But when you introduce law, you're saying you have to verify. So how do our kids verify most things in their everyday now? They don't have driver's licenses, they don't carry their birth certificates around. So during the pandemic, we saw this idea of a digital wallet being introduced in the sense of, yes, you had a vaccination card, it was on QR, but we saw this huge pushback from usually the same voices who don't like government control, but they want some form of control for their kids. And so a digital wallet, no matter where we are on this planet, is one of the best things that people could carry to identify who they are, how old they are. But we need a structure and an oversight system that really protects our private information. What the UK is doing is that you go to a website, a computer scans your screen and basically identifies whether your face looks old enough to access a website. In that space, there is no gating. There's no verification other than you don't look like you're 11. But in that, what does privacy look like when it comes to individuals who want to access explicit content, but they don't want the government to know?
Right.
In certain states in the United States, you have to upload your driver's license to access a website like YouPorn. So the reality of it here is that, yes, we can introduce things that are extreme in the sense of, we're not going to protect the kids, we're going to make sure they can't get in, but there is no bouncer, there's no doorman, there's nobody at the store checking the driver's license. And if we as a society rely on our driver's license or ID to make choices around alcohol or tobacco, what does it mean for our children to have to carry something that identifies that they shouldn't go to bad places?
Right.
We have to address how those bad places exist and then talk about whether or not there should be a verification for adults, not for kids.
No, very strong points. And I hadn't particularly looked at it from that point of view, in that to hold our children to this sort of identification in law, then we have to hold the rest of society up to it. And there are many people that are doing nothing wrong. It's just simply not something that they want to have publicly acknowledged. It is an interesting way. But also, too, as a parent, how do you sort of navigate whether it's, the manosphere or your children are going into, say, online groups talking about things that, morally you don't align with, or you wish that they weren't engaging with. How do you have those discussions with your children?
So when we look at podcasts that are deemed to be extreme radicalization, things like that, yes, there are going to be places that kids go that in the mainstream, people will say, well, that's just your liberal viewpoint, right? So I would be concerned if a child of mine was consuming solely Joe Rogan. But the thing is that in that, there are episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast that enlighten about certain ideas. And the thing is, you can't just say that one side of the coin is the right. You have to look for that medium. So as equally as people are consuming a podcast that we would say from one point, yes, that podcast addresses diversity, equity, inclusion, you might want to look at a podcast that also highlights other concerns that come from a different vantage point. And the more we do that, that's where we find that middle ground that we actually have vacated so quickly in our adult society. Young kids who bring forward conversations that they've consume from places that one person may say is wrong, they may actually say, well, yes, I can see why those points there are not appropriate, but I did learn something here about something that hasn't been spoken about from the other side, and I'd like to have a dialogue about it. And that's really kind of the healthy use of the internet we're looking for. But when we're looking at radicalization, parents have to be on the outlook for those concerns. And we see obviously groups that are rooted in hate, that are entrenched in creating division, creating more and more content that is mainstream, that is targeted towards children. And whether that's on TikTok or Snapchat, whatever the app, the The app isn't the issue, it's the content. So looking periodically at what your kids do online is a healthy way of approaching what should be talked about. But again, is oversight going to give you the tools you need? The first caller highlighted, yes, you don't have the time of your day to go through all the things your kids do online. You shouldn't necessarily be doing that in the first place, because oversight does not necessarily equate to trust, because kids will find the ability to go into a variety of different tools to get online where they want to go. So having conversations with your kids about themes in our society, trends that are occurring, not just dismissing it going, oh, everything's so stupid because of the internet. The reality of it is the internet is the conduit. And it's not like watching cable TV where you can say, hey, we don't have Fox News in this house. Your kids are going to consume things that you don't know about. But if you open up dialogues based on what's happening in our world, conversations around politics, conversations around the environment, and you start to see those red flags and your child saying, well, climate change isn't real, where did you hear that from? If you hear it based on an educator, you can go to school. But if they say, well, I heard it on Joe Rogan's podcast, now you have a good idea of what your child is consuming.
Right. Okay. We're starting a new school year. There's already calls for, they've implemented cell phone bans. There's calls for less reliance on technology in online learning. A lot of parents think there's no time for screens in the classroom, but it varies widely from, not necessarily even just school to school, but teacher to teacher.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts of sort of that role? I sometimes feel like, you can't unring that bell. You've brought technology, especially since the pandemic, so fully into a student's life and integrated it into the curriculum. But do we need to, perhaps push for a greater balance in our schools at the very least?
Well, it's not so much looking for the balance, it's really addressing how much we have. And so for the past couple of years in teaching at the University of Victoria, I've had the privilege of working with future educators in how to find that balance using tech in the classroom. And whether the extreme be a teacher creating an Instagram account so that they can do nature walks and document content so kids can use Google's AI to cross-reference what they found, there are ways of bringing the classroom into the devices that kids bring from home. And the reality of it is when we talk about cell phone bans, over the past year, we've seen numbers of kids bringing in multiple devices. You're not going to curb the use solely with bans. You really have to get kids to make a choice to put it down. And when parents see their kids playing sports, they actively know that the child's not on the cell phone, right? So if kids can constructively put phones away for the purpose of sport, we can introduce not only ideas, but boundaries that allow them to put it down because they want to in the classroom. But in the idea where we heard about the concerns around AI from our third caller there, I just want to highlight here that AI itself, the bigger concern is whether kids are going to be learning. But if they're using AI as a learning addendum, as a tutor, we recently saw Superintendent of West Vancouver, Chris Kennedy, introduce a whole conversation about how AI can be used in partnership with learning to not only get a measurement, but really identify how kids can use these tools as they progress into post-secondary in the working world. Because if we see this contraction of employment due to AI, what does it mean for the learner themselves to learn how to best optimize it so that they can have a working tool in their pocket that says, I know how to use these tools. I'm emerging from a learning facility that is secondary based, but I'm ready to hit the ground running. And then you also have educators who go, well, as much as we can have concerns about plagiarism, I'm looking to see whether or not a student can use these tools to maximize their learning. I don't want students having to pay for a textbook. I want them learning how to use the tools that are going to be in their everyday life to not only produce great content, but show me the human in partnership with the tech generation. Because all the AI we're using right now when it comes to ChatGPT and searching is a maximized Google result that gives us everything we could possibly get from that Google search and then put it into a contextual way that we can consume it. Years and years ago, Google was the worst thing you'd ever use as a resource because the professor would say, I'm not accepting you going to Google. I want you to read the paper. Yes, we can read the paper, but all I'm really looking for is the paragraph that gives me the context of what the question I'm being asked is. And so we want education to become something that is harmonized with the workforce. We have to use these tools in healthy ways and then balance that out where children are learning more and more about the tools at their disposal, but also where the consequence of using it in an abusive way could exist.
Okay. I've grappled with this. I have kids in their teens, their late teens. They've asked, oh, maybe I could have a YouTube channel, or can I have, something that they want to be content creators, as so many people do now. What are your thoughts on that for for kids having these content channels. And how do you navigate that with your children?
If your kids came forward and said, I want to be a journalist, I want to get a microphone, I want to go interview people, I think you'd be inclined to say yes because of your experience. But also your experience is different than, let's say, the 1970s, 80s male reporter, because your lived experience when it comes to comments or people making judgment gives you a unique ability to kind of feed your children information about the perils of the job.
Yeah.
The thing is that a lot of parents hear YouTube content and are like, oh, you're just going to be, making some stupid themes. We have literally millionaires who create content without
It's a
having
viable career now.
Viable career, but the thing is, you've taken away the executive producer who saw a kid in a mall and said, "We got to make this kid famous." We take away the toxic parents who are firmly invested to make sure their kid stays in the sitcom.
Right.
The thing is that if there is positive content, if there is information that can be shared, if it is something that even at the end of the day is kind of stupid, our consumption-based society allows young people to do so many amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather be a guide who's willing to help children learn more about the risk factors as opposed to, that's stupid, go back and put your head back into a textbook?
Jesse, it was so wonderful to speak with you, and this is a topic that we could dedicate probably a month's worth of shows to, and still have avenues to explore. So I thank you for all your time with us today, and we'll check in with you again soon.
Thank you. And again, Erase BC, for any issues that kids are facing in BC schools, it is the #1 reporting tool, erasebc.com or .ca.
Thank you so much. That is Jesse Miller, the founder of Mediated Reality, an education company focused on media education and media literacy. It is 12:47, and this is BC Today. And we have a lot more on the day's top stories on the afternoon shows in your region here in Metro Vancouver. This is what's coming up on the coast.
Gloria Makarenko here, and I hope you can join us for On the Coast this afternoon. The superintendent from the Surrey School District is going to join us to talk about AI in the classroom and how the district is adapting to it. Also, Bill McKibben is an American environmentalist, an author, a journalist who has written extensively on the impact of global warming. He's quite a climate activist, too. And his new book is called Here Comes the Sun. It focuses on harnessing the power of solar energy. So Bill McKibben is going to be our guest on the Coast between 3 and 6 this afternoon. I hope you can join us.
Thank you so much, Gloria. We'll tune in for sure. Thank you. Now, we know the city of Surrey is growing quickly and set to become the largest municipality in BC in the years coming forth. Earlier today, Surrey councillor Linda Annis announced her plans to run for the position of Mayor of Surrey in the next municipal election. She was first elected to council in 2018 and then started her second term in 2022, where she serves today. And joining us now from Surrey is Linda Annis. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, councillor.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me on this afternoon.
A pretty big and exciting day for you and your supporters. Tell us why you are running for Mayor of Surrey next year.
Well, I'm running for several reasons. First and foremost, we are lagging behind desperately in Surrey in terms of infrastructure. We have issues around transportation. We have too many school portables. don't have a strong economic plan for the city. There's so many things that need to be addressed.
And, you know, you're not new to politics, but by some standards, you are fairly new. Do you feel you have that leadership and decision-making experience that's needed to run a city that's coming up, as you said, you know, to 1 million residents soon? It is growing at an enormous rate.
I absolutely do think so. I wouldn't be putting my name forward if I had any hesitation whatsoever. I have 7 years on city council, and prior to that, a lot of experience in the corporate sector, which I think will be a real nice addition to City Hall. And I've done a lot of community service throughout the years. So I do come with a lot of experience in 7 years, as I said, in municipal government.
And, you know, with that experience, you have obviously seen a lot under Brenda Locke and Doug McCallum. What are the failings that you find right now with the current city council under Brenda Locke?
We've been stuck on one issue, one single issue, and that's the police transition. You know, it's not helping to move it forward. There's been roadblocks put in one after the other, and we've just been focused on that for the past 3 years with getting little else done in the city. And that's not right. You know, we have between 12 and 1,500 people moving to Surrey each and every month. We need to be focusing on building more infrastructure. We need more rec centers, pools. You know, we need more schools here. There's so much that we need. And thinking this morning as I was driving here, the transit issue, it took me over an hour to get from South Surrey to my announcement, which was just close by in City Centre.
And it is, you know, one thing to point out the issues and identify the problems that are in the city of Surrey. What would you do to concretely change and improve these issues if you were to become mayor?
Well, a few things. First and foremost, we need to build a strong economic plan. The residents of Surrey commute far too often to other cities in the Lower Mainland. In fact, there's a study that shows the residents of Surrey commute twice as much as any other residents in neighboring communities. We need to fix that. We need to have jobs here in Surrey. We also need to be looking at our public safety and looking at how we can get better training for our police service. And one of the things that I've been advocating for is building a center of excellence, a police academy where all municipal police officers could be trained right here in Surrey.
And to keep with the theme of Surrey Police, you've obviously criticized the length of time it has taken for the Surrey Police transition and the amount of focus that has been on this transition. If you were elected as mayor, what would you do differently to address this transition and perhaps diffuse some of that ongoing tension?
Well, we need to be working in a very collaborative relationship with the provincial government, the Surrey Police Board, the Surrey Police Service. The people that we should be picking the fights with aren't those. We should be picking the fights with the gangs, the extortionists, and people that are doing crime here in Surrey. We want them off our streets, and we need to be focusing on that, not picking fights with government and police service.
Well, and that is a valid point, but also, a question is, as we see Surrey continue to grow, and as you mentioned, it's causing problems with infrastructure, it's causing problems with transportation, but the gang violence has been an ongoing and growing issue as well. What specific steps need to be taken to deal with this in the city of Surrey?
We know that kids as young as 14 years old are being targeted in schoolyards in Surrey and in other Lower Mainland cities as well. We need to make sure that those vulnerable kids have someplace to go after school that's a healthy, productive activity. Many of these kids, don't have after-school programs. So what I would like to see is our rec centers open for no charge for kids in their teen years to go and use all of our facilities. It's a great place for them to, build teams and learn a new sport or new activity.
And, As you've been a councillor, what have your conversations been like with Surrey residents, throughout your term when it comes to, say, prioritizing public safety?
Well, I've talked to a lot of the residents in Surrey about public safety. I also do a dual role. I'm a city councillor, but I'm also the executive director of Crime Stoppers.
Yes.
So I hear a lot from the residents in Surrey about their concerns around public safety. And, much of it has been focused, in terms of fighting whether we should keep or not keep this transition going, first of all, through Doug McCallum's term and then through Brenda's. And what I would say to that, we should have done in 2018, we should have had a referendum and settled this issue once and for all so that we could have moved forward in a much quicker way to complete the transition or to stay with the RCMP.
Mm-hmm. Earlier this year, Mayor Brenda Locke confirmed the city's plans to build a new 10,000-seat arena and entertainment district, and it's part of plans to really showcase Surrey as a leading city. Is building this structure in line with the priorities on your plate if you were to become mayor next year?
Absolutely not. Mayor Locke has only $4 million allocated to this particular structure, and the structure we know, based on what other recreation facilities cost, is going to cost us over $600 million. That money is better spent in building more pools, recreation facilities, playing fields, and perhaps culture and activities for kids. Okay. We need to get our bread and butter things down first. One day, perhaps have a stadium, but not this day. Let's get our basics in place first.
And we've only got about a minute left, but before I let you go, if you're elected as mayor, how important will cooperating with both our provincial and federal governments be for you as the mayor of Surrey? Consulting and cooperation, I should say.
We need to be meeting regularly with our MPs and MLAs. Surrey is home to 10 MLAs, and we know that's a large voting bloc in Victoria. We need to be meeting with them regularly and making sure that they know and they're representing us in terms of what our needs are here in Surrey. Surrey is not getting its fair share of support from the provincial or federal government, and we need to change that.
Councillor Annis, very, very thankful that you took time with us for today. I know it is an incredibly busy one, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is current Surrey City Councillor Linda Annis. Today, she announced her candidacy for the Mayor of Surrey.